Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Wednesday. This is Phil Cardow. I hope you're all doing really well. We've got a very special guest with me here today, and she is joining me all the way from Hollywood, California, and it is the lovely LANI BUESS. LANI is a master hypnotist and an NLP practitioner, and LANI today has been very generous. She's decided to give us some of her precious time to discuss something that a lot of us can probably either relate to personally or with the clients that we work with, and something I've certainly been able to relate to at various stages in my life, and that's imposter syndrome. So LANI, thank you very much for being here. How are you this morning, or should I say this afternoon, because it's what, 5:30 in Hollywood at the moment?
It is 5:30. Yeah, I'm doing good, and thanks for having me, Phil, on the show. So I appreciate it.
Beautiful. So yeah, let's just dive straight in. I want to throw it at you. What is imposter syndrome, LANI? What is it? We've all heard of it.
Yeah. So it was originally coined as imposter phenomenon.
Right.
And there was a research study back in 1978 between these two psychologists, Dr. Pauline Clance and Dr. Suzanne Imes. And they did a study about called the imposter phenomenon among high achieving women.
Right.
So essentially what it is, and it's not a syndrome, it's something that's been called a syndrome over time, and I think it's due to the media. No one really knows where it turned into a syndrome, but a syndrome would be, something that's like DSM, and this is not like a diagnosis.
Yes.
So, but it's a phenomenon. It's we'll call it imposterism or so. But essentially, is
that word imposter?
Imposterism.
Awesome.
I usually call it just imposter syndrome because it's just easier to say. But essentially, it's when highly confident and capable people have just low confidence levels to the point where essentially they might feel like they're a fraud. They kind of bucked the system and they're afraid people will find out. So it's essentially people who have a hard time internalizing their successes. So they'll say their successes are due to like dumb luck, or I was in the right place, the right time, or just because of connections I have. So it's sort of like discounting your successes essentially, and due to kind of like low confidence or what's going on, it's externalizing them, so it's that.
Awesome. So you mentioned it was originally aimed at or found in among high achieving women. Did that have something to do with like the wage gap at the time or something surrounding that, or am I correct in assuming that?
It was definitely during a time when there was a lot of gender stereotyping in the 70s. It was kind of like a time when they'd assumed women were just kind of less capable intellectually compared to men.
Really,
and
that's not relevant at all.
Yeah. And women, it's an interesting thing where at the time they didn't, and it's still to this day where they realize women and minorities might be suffering more from this, but men, they realize over time, men experience this as well. They just do it in a different way. So women essentially have a hard time, again, internalizing their successes. It's sort of like kind of what they call attribution theory. Men have a little bit of an easier time going, okay, I studied, so therefore like, I did well, so women have a little bit harder time of admitting that, like what I did to achieve this, so yeah.
So they have validating it to themselves, or
yeah, taking ownership, and it's because of that. It's due to various reasons. For instance, it could be early childhood messaging. So for instance, and this goes for men and women, because nowadays we realize that there's a statistic out there that 70% of the population suffers from this at least once in their life. So
70.
Yeah, 70. So all walks of life, both sexes, or everyone can face this. Mm-hmm. So they're realizing it's from various causes. So it could be early childhood messaging, for instance.
And what is that? What is early childhood messaging? Because we all
talk
about early childhood, but what is that specifically, and how does that relate to?
Yeah. So for instance, if say you are a sibling, right? You have a couple, brothers or sisters, and you're being compared to them. you know, you're being compared, you know, maybe there's the intelligent one or the pretty one, you know, and you're being compared to a sibling, and that parent might be going, oh, you know, do a little bit better, like Jimmy. You know what I mean?
More like your brother, or more like your sister, or
yeah, you know. It also can be when parents want perfection from their kids. You know, it's like kind of love is being shown through success, like how good at you are at something, you know, your performance. So, but it could also go in the opposite spectrum, you know, parents who don't praise their kids enough,
yep.
and that kid wanting validation from the parents over time. So it's kind of like those various messages from early childhood where you kind of end up being an adult and comparing yourself a lot to like others, you know, or,
Yeah,
you know, you're looking for validation externally, you know, it's a lot of that. But they're also noticing also that imposterism comes up contextually in situations. And they're noticing that certain populations experience it more so than others.
You mentioned
like
that
groups of
yesterday. You
people.
mentioned even people from certain geographical dynamics can be more prone to or susceptible to this. Is that correct? And how does that work?
Yeah, in a sense, like types of people. So like it could be those like foreign exchange students, right? Like international students. Like they're facing a culture shock, going to a different area, trying to learn a new language, and being kind of thrown into something that's foreign to them. A lot of students, even professors, where you're constantly being judged by your intellect, right? They're also noticing that if you're like kind of a first, right? Like you're the first student or the first person to go to university, you know, in your family, and there's no role model. So you're kind of like wading through this weird experience. Yeah. Women, or you're like the first minority in like a field, like, you know, a male nurse where there's predominantly women, or women in tech, you know, like this is not, you know, so there's all these various creatives and actors where you're constantly being judged, you know, like it's in so many various fields and in situations, and it's sort of where that's dynamic is happening, where you're kind of your intellect is being judged. You're first. Michelle Obama admitted that she had imposterism, first, you know, Black first lady, you know, like
female,
yeah. So it's like
absolutely right. So not really everyone escapes this. Is that correct, or is there's no one that can't be susceptible to this? Is that correct, or?
Yeah, I think we can all suffer from it or kind of like experience it. Yeah. And I think that people who don't experience it, I've never really met them.
People who experience it, I was thinking about this morning, just with the people you mentioned, the people that are there first, or the people that are doing something before everyone else, or you know, ahead of their siblings, or whatever it is. Do those people ever use that as like a anxious energy or a motivating power or something? Like, does that help people, drive people forward because they have that energy, or that I'm the first, I shouldn't be here, whatever it is going on in their head? Is that ever a positive thing for them?
Yeah, that's a really good point you bring up, because I was talking to Dr. Valerie Young, who's an internationally recognized expert in this. She's a speaker and author. And she was also kind of studying the research of Dr. Pauline Clance, who initially kind of, you know, was examining this whole phenomenon. And she was saying to me that how all of these, we basically manage anxieties, right, or fears for those of us who've ever experienced imposterism before. We manage our anxiety or fears. Yeah. So what we do is like, we might have these fears, anxieties, like, I want to fail. I don't want to be disappointed. I want to be embarrassed. Like, you know, so, and how that shows up is very different for everyone. So for instance, for me, when I was doing it, I would overly prepare. Like I'd be like, I have to overwork. I'll take 6 hours to prepare for something because I don't want to look like an idiot. Like I'll try to think of every scenario that might happen. Like, yeah. Or you might procrastinate. You might do the opposite. You might go, I don't want to do this. I don't want to finish this. I don't want to start this. You might self-sabotage.
Yeah.
You might not want to show up at all. That was another thing that I was doing, is like, I don't want to be seen. Like, I don't want to kind of like, let me just like pretend I'm a little invisible and not like make any waves. Yeah. So it's kind of essentially managing all your anxieties, because it's like, yeah, I'm afraid of all these potential fears, and then I have to manage my anxieties, and I don't want people to find out like I might be a fraud, but yet you're capable, you're highly capable. That's the difference. This is not somebody who's like narcissistic, who thinks they're really great at everything and might not be, it's something you're capable, but you just think you're not.
Or if it's typically people that are highly capable, people that are not highly capable, is this an issue for them as well in any way?
Well, interesting. So and I think it might be different. So if you're not highly capable, and I think a lot of this comes down to how we perceive learning, right? So if you're not highly capable, let me backtrack a little bit. So with like learning, right? So a lot of this comes down to, when I was talking to Dr. Young, it's how we perceive competency and our failures and our mistakes and criticisms and fear, right? How we perceive that in our head. And a lot of people who have this have different types of competency. For instance, like I fall in the category of the expert, which means I don't think I'm an expert at all. I think kind of the opposite, that I have to consume information and knowledge because I don't know enough, right? I gotta keep consuming, right? So, but it also falls into like, how am I perceiving learning, right? Yeah. Like learning is essentially, we kind of all stumble along with that, and if we're not competent, if we're not competent and we're learning something, that's normal. We're supposed to be confused. We're supposed to not know, So I think that depends on where you're falling in line of like, if you're not competent and you're learning something, that's totally normal. And you should have those fears and anxieties. You know what I mean? Yeah.
How did you, LANI, end up niching down to this? I mean, as an NLP practitioner and a hypnotist, you could have done anything, right? Like, there's not much that these modalities can't help with in at least some capacity. So I assume there's a story here, and I love hearing stories. So why did you end up with helping people with imposter syndrome?
Sure, because I suffered from this in such a bad way, shape and form, that I stopped doing hypnotherapy. I stopped doing all of coaching for a while. So I grew up with really bad social anxiety. And so I had to wade through all that initially, just to like, that's like a whole part of it. And then I think that's a part of it, like public speaking. Oh my God. The fact that I'm even doing this with you, Phil, is like, shows how far I've come.
The whole industry on its own, public speaking, isn't it?
Yeah. So, and I think I've had a form of this in the various careers I've been in, but when I started working with others, like as a hypnotist and a practitioner and like a coach, it really hit me hard, to the point where I did stop working with others. When I was working with clients, and it was before I even worked with clients, it was just like, I would get caught in my mind and going, oh my God, like, what if I can't help them? Or like, what if I don't know enough? And fear of failing them, like getting caught in the ego mind of like, this is becoming about me, more about the client. So it's like, and then not wanting to show up, and then kind of having all of my fears, and became debilitating to the point I stopped, and that's how I knew is also different, because people were like, the more you do it, you'll just get more confident and feel good. And then the more I was doing it, I was realizing I'm not facing something, and I was actually getting more nervous and scared. So yeah. So then I kind of was like, wait a minute, there's something else going on here. I don't feel like I'm good enough, but I know I'm capable, so like, it was how I started it was because it was about me. And I was like, I want to work with others. I knew connection and service to others was like high values for me, like I want to help people. And so then why am I not doing this? And then something I had a question,
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. That sounds like my story as well. That worrying about the client, whether you can help them or not, and all that sort of stuff. It ticks a lot of boxes. Makes me realise maybe I've done a lot more imposter syndrome than I realised, I suppose, in my life. As you know, LANI, like anxiety is something that a lot of hypnotists and NLPers work with every day. Personally, for me, it probably makes up, I'd say, 90% of my client base, if not more. And I found, and I'm sure others will agree, that sometimes even when the anxiety and any of that unnecessary fear has been successfully removed, or they've dealt with it, processed it, whatever it is you do to help them with that, there's quite often that residual feeling of inadequacy, like they're not good enough, still hanging around. And that obviously needs to be cleaned up. So my question is, what is my question? Do you believe that there is a connection between anxiety and imposter syndrome, and what advice would you have for other hypnotists, other therapists, other coaches when working with these kinds of issues?
Sure. Definitely think it's can be correlated. I think a lot of people come in to see us and they're like, I have anxieties, right? And they might not know it's related to imposter syndrome, and it could be. And if they don't know, that's fine. They don't need to know that they have like this thing, you know?
Yep.
But essentially, yeah, it can be correlated. And I think I've noticed a lot when people come up to me and I work with people saying, I'm just not good enough.
Yep.
And like self-worth issues, you know? And then I realize, okay, there's some messaging there, some belief system there that they believe that probably didn't originate with them, right? Yeah. And I just worked with somebody literally yesterday. He was like, it's not good enough. And I was like, okay. And is that something you say to yourself inside? Of course. And then, but who's the original voice that's coming from? It's probably not you. And then it became like, there's all these other voices. It was like, yeah. So it's like, that never was yours in the first place. So when I hear things like that, or someone who's like a perfectionist, you know, I have to do really well, you know, I can't fail, you know, there's these certain fears, anxieties. So yeah, all of that can be correlated to imposter syndrome, and how I essentially, I guess, work with people with all these inadequacies is, one, normalize that. Like, we all feel inadequate, right? We all feel like that. I'm right now, before this call, I was like freaking out. I was like,
you too. I'm like, God, I'm talking expert, and I'm like having imposter syndrome about talking to the imposter syndrome expert. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah, I was like, am I an expert? Like, I don't want to take that on. I was like, don't give it to me. I was like, oh no.
You've given amazing information today already.
Thank you.
I've got one question that you got sent to me through personal message or direct message, whatever it's called. I'm going to read it out, so I'll make sure I get it right.
Yeah.
The asker wishes to maintain their anonymity for obvious reasons. And I actually know this person really, really well. They're a beautiful human being, an amazing therapist in their own right. And I think her question is extremely relevant because it gets bounced around in our industries and professionals, you know, the mindset, hypnosis professions a lot, because a lot of people struggle with this and they feel, I'm just going to make sure I read this out right, they feel like they're troubled by the idea that they're helping people with their issues whilst they too struggle with their own issues or struggle with these things themselves. And honestly, if I didn't know this person so well, I wouldn't be able to pick this up in her life for me. So she's not projecting it at all, which I think is probably common with a lot of people. So the question is, how do I stop feeling inadequate? How do I stop feeling undeserving and less than capable? She says it only comes on sometimes, and when it does, it feels like a monster. I don't feel like I know enough. And if I get challenged and proven wrong, I will be made to look like a tool, which will totally discredit myself. As I said, I know this person really well, and I believe 100% that these fears are unfounded. I mean, that's just my opinion, but I know the work she does, it's amazing. But what would you say to this person, and indeed anyone else that may be in a similar situation, either personally or professionally?
Sure. And it kind of falls back in line with that type of competency, the expert before that I was talking about, which is something I fell into, is like, I don't feel like I know enough, you know, and I'm going to be called out on it. And I literally, in one of the episodes of the show that I do, I was saying this to someone, and his name's Damon Card. He's an NLP practitioner. And he said to me,
Awesome.
How do you know you don't know enough? And I had to stop. Think about that. It's like, how do I know that I don't know enough? And I think what we're doing is playing a comparison game, right? So oftentimes we compare ourselves to other individuals in our field who probably know decades and decades more knowledge than we do. And we're comparing ourselves to them. And I don't know if that's the situation in this case, but I know that's something I did, right? I was kind of like, I don't know enough because I'm looking at these amazing hypnotherapists that have been doing things for decades.
20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah. And then I'm going, I don't know enough. But the reality thing is, and the interesting thing is, dogs bark in the background, sorry. So the interesting thing, I was like, so the interesting thing is, what I started realizing and knowing is that, okay, maybe I need to stop comparing myself to these other people. What if I compared myself to who I was once upon a time to who I am now, and then who I'm becoming, right? So I think like that, a lot of inadequacy is based on that comparison. Yeah. But it's also about stopping. And I was talking to Dr. Suzanne Laurie, a psychologist, and she actually mentored with Dr. Pauline Clance, who did the initial study in 1978. And she was talking about attribution theory, right? So she was saying essentially what that is that we think about the negative things, right? Like, oh my God, I failed that test. And we think about that and we go, that means something about me. That's my identity. Like I failed that test. We're taking things to an identity level. But in reality it could be like an action or behavior that we've done, right? It's like, oh, maybe I just need to brush up on that skill a little bit. Like maybe I need to study statistics harder or something, or maybe there's something there valid that I need to learn. But doesn't mean anything about me as a person, the I am, right? Like it's just a skill building thing that I need to do. And when we have successes, like I did that well, pat yourself on the back, and be like, yeah, I did that. It's not about some dumb luck. You're not external. Don't do less of externalizing that success and make it more permanent and global that you did that. Yeah. And also kind of remember all of those successes you've had in life, to look back on your timeline, right? And kind of like, oh yeah, I've done this and done this. And I think we forget to do that. We forget to look back and be like, wow, look at all these small steps that I've taken to get here. Yep. These are all my successes and I did that, there's nothing wrong with having a little bit of pride in yourself in that, doesn't mean we're boasting and being narcissistic. It's like, no,
healthy.
Yeah. And then you can also visualize your success in the futures, right? So I think there's also a mistake that competency and confidence go hand in hand, right? I would be more confident if I thought I was more competent. But really competent people are fucking terrified. Sorry to swear. I mean, right? Public speaking is number one fear, beyond over death. Yep. And really intelligent people public speaking, they hate it. Well, they'll do it. They're good at it. So it doesn't go hand in hand. So I've realized for myself, I've done a few things that I needed to do to kind of all right, I need to check this imposter syndrome, So a few of those things I just did was okay, when am I externalizing my successes and when do I need to internalize them, But also I kept thinking that I just before sessions, I just need confidence. I need to go there confident. I just didn't know what's going to happen before it happens. And I was like, that doesn't happen.
Wow, that sounds familiar.
Yeah. So what I decided to do is said, wait a minute, what resources do I really need before a client session? And for me, it is curiosity, gentleness with myself, my client, and playfulness. And I kind of, I started stepping into that more. And then going, wait, I cannot take this as seriously. I cannot take myself as so seriously. Yeah. And stop making it about me and make it more about the relationship, the client interaction, the client, yeah. And having more fun with this than I was. It was yeah.
Awesome. That's amazing. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. That's really good. That's great. I've taken on huge amounts of that and we'll reprocess, I suppose, a lot of it after as well. It's amazing. And everyone else who watches this, I'm sure, is going to get a lot of benefit as well. Actually, before we go, you have a show, I believe, LANI. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, or if you want to tell us everything about that?
So I do have a show called Barset. It's on the Hypno 247 network, which is essentially now it's like on Facebook. You can find it on there. I also have some the first 6 episodes I also put on my YouTube channel. You can just find me on LANI BUESS. So far I've interviewed 16 individuals. So what the show Worth It is essentially about is imposter syndrome. It's about talking to individuals, hypnotists, researchers, educators, therapists about this topic, talking about them experiencing it themselves, how they handle client work with those who suffer imposter syndrome. And it's more than just a talk. So because I was like, we need to give people tips, techniques, thought-provoking, questions they can ask themselves. So at the end of each episode, essentially that individual, that expert is providing some information to help people shift out of those fraud feelings. And so that's essentially what the show's about. Yeah.
Awesome. Sounds like it's going to be totally worth it. I'll stick all your links to your show, your YouTube channel, everything below this video so everyone can have a look at that. So LANI, I want to thank you personally for coming on board today and being on the ground floor of what we're doing being on the ground floor of what we're doing in this group. It's amazing to have you here. Thank you very much for taking out valuable time out of your day. I'm very grateful. I'm sure everyone else is. So all the best to you in the future, and wish you all as much success as you can possibly handle moving forward.
Oh, thanks, Phil. And I wish the same for you. And I just thank you for having me on this. This is awesome. I appreciate it.
All right. Have a great day.